Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of the Roundabout Way of Fate. This will be Part 30, Chapter 20, entitled The After Effects. The Chief of Police visits them the next morning. Kame and the hero Manuel are here too, but they stay silent, as Chief Surigame tells them of Stain's condition. Then, to the trio's surprise, he informs them that they must be punished for yesterday's incident because they used their quirks without permission. Understandably, this pisses Todoroki off. He defends their actions a bit too aggressively for Izuku's comfort, and claims that if they had not acted, the native would have been killed. He also claims that Izuku shouldn't get in trouble because he didn't use his quirk to fight. Kame interjects at this, saying that Izuku isn't supposed to use his quirk without the supervision of a licensed healer. In the end, the chief of police does them a favor. Since there were very few witnesses to the event, he's willing to sweep this under the rug. The incident will remain undisclosed, and Endeavor will take credit for defeating the hero killer. However, as a result, none of them will get any recognition for their efforts. It's a small price, one they're willing to pay for the pardon. Kame still takes the chance to scold Izuku for willingly running into a fight, though. "Geez, kid, what did I tell you about listening to the heroes?" She gives him a light chop on the head. "Sorry, Kame-san," he apologizes, then adds, "I'm glad you're okay." She waves him off. It was just a concussion." She points to the bandage wrapped around her head. "They fixed me up just fine." "Well then," Chief Surigame woofs. "If that's all, I should be going." He turns to leave, but Ida interrupts him. "Wait, sir." They all glance at Ida in surprise. The blue-haired boy's eyes dart to Izuku briefly before he frowns. "It's just something I've been concerned about. Stain mentioned Shigaraki having an interest in Midoriya-kun. He said he'd been shown a picture of him." Izuku blinks. In the chaos of the night, he'd totally forgotten about that little detail. It's disturbing, to say the least, but not entirely unexpected. Recalling his conversation with All Might after USJ, he supposes that he shouldn't be surprised that Shigaraki has taken an interest in him. Him healing All Might messed up the villain's plan. But before he can panic, he reminds himself that there's still no need to worry. Shigaraki made a big mistake, and All Might is still strong. Sure, the news is a little unnerving, but for the most part, it doesn't change anything. He wishes he could reassure his friends of this, but it'd be difficult without going into this conversation with All Might. Chief Surigame tilts his head. "The villains, Shigaraki and Kurogiri, were spotted by chance on top of a water tower in Hosu last night. It is assumed that the League of Villains are responsible for the attack on the city. If what you say is true, then Stain most likely has connections to the League. As for Shigaraki's interest..." The dog turns to look at Izuku. "I will let others know, but I wouldn't worry about it too much if I were you. Last night's attack resulted in 2 healers getting seriously injured. The heroes will no doubt be on high alert." With that said, he bows his head politely and leaves. Kame and Manuel bid their goodbyes as well, leaving the trio alone once again. Todoroki frowns. "He probably means that my father will increase security around healers now." At Izuku's expression, he adds, "Not necessarily because he's worried. Mostly because it looks bad for the agency. 2 of his healers were hospitalized on his watch. He'll get bad press if he doesn't do anything." Sighing, he sits back down on his bed and muses. "I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to prevent healers from leaving the agency at all before someone manages to talk sense into him." Oh. Izuku's eyes drop to his lap, lingering on his bandaged calf. He feels Todoroki gazing at him for a few moments before the boy says, "By the way, I'd like to apologize on behalf of my father's agency, and myself for not being able to protect you better." "Huh?" Izuku looks up. "Both of our healers got hurt, even when they had protection," Todoroki says. Ida sighs. "Neither of you would have gotten injured if I hadn't been stupid enough to go after Stain. This is all my fault." "No," Todoroki says, then adds, "Well, yeah, that wasn't a good idea, but don't blame yourself. Native probably would have died if you had done nothing. I should have." Before he can start putting the blame on himself, Izuku interrupts. All right, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's no one's fault. Let's just, I don't know, take this experience for what it was and let it encourage us to do better in the future?" It's kind of lame and comes out sounding like a question, but it seems to satisfy his friends. Ida is quiet for a moment, then says, "And I'm sorry for what I said before. Of course you're a hero. I'm sorry for saying that you weren't." Izuku smiles and Ida lifts his head to give him a solemn look. "But please, never do something like that again." Izuku blinks. "What?" "Rushing into a fight like that." Ida shakes his head. "Midoriya-kun, you could have been killed." Izuku's eyes widen. He can't believe what he's hearing. "But—" "I agree," Todoroki says. "You got lucky this time, but that's only because Stain was reluctant to kill healers. The next villain might not be so kind." Izuku protests. "But if I had done nothing, then—" "I'm not trying to say that I'm ungrateful," Ida tries to reassure. "It's just—" He trails off, looking a bit hesitant. Todoroki turns to Izuku. "You're not a fighter," he says, his voice soothing but firm. "You're a healer. Your place isn't on the battlefield." Izuku swallows back a retort, trying to quell the indignation flaring in his chest. He knows that. Of course he knows that. But it still leaves a bitter taste in the back of his throat. Blinking away the tears that sting the edges of his eyes, he turns away and leans back against his pillows, dropping his gaze to his lap. "Fine." He doesn't see the glance Todoroki and Ida share. The news story breaks out about an hour later. There's no TV in their room, but their phones suddenly start blowing up with texts from their classmates. The official story released by the police was that when 7 pro heroes and 3 high school interns came across the hero killer, Endeavor took care of the situation. Ida, Todoroki, and Izuku's names were not made public, but it's not hard for their classmates to figure out who these students were, since Ida's internship was in Hosu and Todoroki was with his father. Granted, no one knew that Izuku was with the Endeavor Agency too, but the story mentioned that one of the students was a healer in training, so it's kind of obvious. Kachan even calls Izuku, who smiles apologetically at Ida and Todoroki before limping out of the room to take the call in the hallway. "What the fuck is this shit I'm hearing on the news?" Kachan demands as soon as he puts the phone to his ear. "You were fucking attacked by the hero killer?" "Don't worry, Kachan. Everything's fine," Izuku reassures, leaning heavily against the wall. "Weren't you listening? Endeavor saved us." "Are you all right?" Kachan presses stubbornly. "Where are you?" Izuku hesitates, glancing down at his bandaged stomach and leg before saying, Yeah, I'm fine. I'm back at Endeavor's agency." He feels bad lying to his best friend, but he knows the blonde will only worry incessantly if he tells him the truth. Anyway, I've got to get back to work, but I'll text you later, okay?" Kachan grumbles out a response and Izuku hastily hangs up. The rest of the day goes by slowly. Ida gets discharged around noon. Thanks to Izuku's healing, his injuries were minor. The Nomu had knocked him aside pretty roughly when its wing had snatched Izuku, so the doctors kept him overnight just in case, but there's no reason for him to stay any longer. As for Todoroki, since he has relatively light injuries, he intends to return to his father's agency later in the evening. Endeavor, however, is apparently insisting that they both come back to the agency. The doctors don't seem too happy about it, but since the Endeavor agency does have a good medical center, they reluctantly discharge Izuku too. Despite his injured arm, Todoroki carries both their bags while they make their way out of the hospital. Izuku feels bad about it, but there isn't much he can do about it since he needs his crutches just to be able to limp around. The stitches under his rib cage pull uncomfortably the whole time, but he doesn't have to go very far. A fancy car is sent to pick them up at the front of the hospital. "Is Kame-san not here?" Izuku asks, noticing the absence of his mentor. A sidekick steps out of the passenger side and opens the back door for him. "No," she says, taking his crutches and helping him inside. "Endeavor doesn't want any of his healers to leave the agency unless it's absolutely necessary." As Todoroki slides in beside him, Izuku notices that rather than there being just one sidekick who drives, they're accompanied by 3 sidekicks. Izuku glances at Todoroki, who simply shrugs, as if to say, "I told you." When they return to the agency, the sidekicks lead them to the medical center and take Todoroki's bags, which contain both his and Izuku's torn costumes. Kame greets them and begins checking over their injuries. "Osaki-san would use his quirk on you guys," she says, "but he's kind of had his hands full with dealing with the sidekicks' injuries after last night. Those Nomus are nasty things." "Yeah," Izuku frowns. It's concerning to know that there's multiple of those beasts. He's just glad that none of them seem to be as strong as the one at USJ was. Pushing away those thoughts, he looks at Todoroki, who is sitting on the end of his bed. "What are you going to do? You're not going to be training with your arm all messed up like that, right?" Todoroki shakes his head. "My old man's probably going to be busy dealing with the press for a couple of days." A small smile pulls at his lips. "He hates doing press work. He's going to be miserable." The pleased look on his face has Izuku giggling. Kame uses her quirk on both of them before ordering Izuku to sleep. He stays in one of the rooms in the medical center, since it's kind of pointless to send him back to his guest room when it's so difficult for him to move around. But Todoroki bids him good night and goes back to wherever he stays during the night. He doesn't sleep as well as he did the previous night, the pain from his injuries occasionally waking him up. There isn't much for him to do during the next day or the day after that. Kame still teaches him more about the world of hero healers and even shows him how to use some of their expensive equipment. But he laments not being able to practice training his quirk. Of course, just when he thought he might have figured something out with it, he goes and gets injured. It's frustrating, but at least Todoroki has time to hang out with him now. Like he said, Endeavor is too busy dealing with the press to train him, so the bi-colored boy spends much of the day with Izuku. It's kind of nice. Todoroki is easy to talk to, and he doesn't seem to mind when Kame takes Izuku's attention away to teach him something new. He even brings Izuku his meals from the dining commons, and eats on the bed with him so that he doesn't have to move around too much. "Aw, what a gentleman," Kame coos, ruffling Todoroki's hair as she passes by. His messed-up hair, coupled with his bewildered expression, sends Izuku into another fit of giggles. "Sorry about her." He snorts. "Here, I can—" He reaches out to fix Todoroki's hair, only to freeze before touching him. For some reason, he wonders if this is okay. If maybe he's pushing any boundaries. It's just hair, but Todoroki has never seemed the physically affectionate type, and, knowing his past, Izuku doesn't blame him. Todoroki blinks curiously at his silence, eyes darting to his hovering hand. Then, he slowly leans his head forward, wordlessly giving him permission. Izuku's lips twitch upwards as he lays his hand on his friend's hair. It's surprisingly soft, sliding easily through his fingers as he goes about fixing the strands, separating the white from the red, and smoothing it down. Todoroki remains quiet, eyes fluttering slightly when Izuku accidentally pulls on a tuft. As Izuku gently combs the boy's hair with his fingers, he feels his ear brush against the side of his palm. Blinking in surprise, Izuku slowly lets his hand lower until he's cupping the left side of Todoroki's face. His scar feels rough under his fingertips. Izuku tilts his head curiously, gaze fixated on where their skin meets. It's strange, not having his quirk automatically activate in response to such a blatant scar. It's something he's always had to be cautious about when healing Todoroki, to be careful not to linger too long or else he'd heal the scar as well. He supposes, now, that he's never been able to casually touch Todoroki like he does with the rest of his friends. Another part of him wonders if, considering his past, Todoroki could be touch-starved. His eyes trail away from the scar to meet Todoroki's mismatched gaze. The boy is staring at him silently. Izuku's cheeks heat up. He'd been so wrapped up in his thoughts he didn't realize that he's just been cupping his friend's cheek for an uncomfortable amount of time. "Sorry," he yelps, yanking his hand away and scrambling backwards. Unfortunately, since they were eating dinner on the bed, he accidentally kicks his utensils and they clatter to the ground. Flustered, he practically dives off of the bed to go after them. "Shit, sorry, I'll get... Ow!" "Midoriya." Todoroki jumps to his feet and grabs him by the shoulders to steady him. "Did you just step on the fork?" "Nope," Izuku squeaks, even though he totally did. He hides his injured foot by leaning on his good leg. "Nope, I just, moved too quickly and pulled on my stitches, that's all. But I'm fine." Todoroki looks a little unconvinced, but gently pushes him back to the bed. "Well, all right, but take it easy. I can pick this up." Once Izuku is seated on the mattress again, Todoroki quickly picks up the fallen utensils and puts them back onto the tray. Izuku's face is still hot, and for some reason his heart feels like it's trying to beat out of his chest. What is happening? Even calm, cool, and collected Todoroki is looking a little ruffled. I should probably, Yeah, Izuku manages to stammer out. Todoroki nods jerkily and grabs both their trays, obviously trying to retreat as quickly as possible. "I'll, see you tomorrow." Izuku gives him a weak smile and flops back onto the bed once he's gone. When Kame comes by to check on him a few minutes later, she finds him curled up on his side, clutching a pillow to his very red face. "Is your foot bleeding?" she asks. Izuku just groans into his pillow. Eventually, Todoroki does have to return to Endeavor once the man has finished dealing with the press. Izuku isn't sure if there will be any regulation changes in regards to the protection of healers from now on, but he does know that there was some fuss from the press about his and Kame's injuries. He's been checking his social media every morning, and the press was not afraid to criticize Endeavor for this mishap, despite the Flame Hero's supposed victory over Stain. They even went as far as to bring up Osaki's kidnapping. He figures this is what Todoroki meant when he said that 2 healers being injured would look bad for the agency. By the end of the week, Izuku's wounds are mostly healed. He can walk around with only a slight limp, but his quirk still won't work until he's completely better. As much as he regrets not being able to train with it more, he is satisfied with all that he's learned during this internship. He bows politely to Kame and thanks her for everything she's taught him. "Ah, don't mention it, kid," she says, ruffling his curls. "It was my pleasure. I'm sorry I couldn't help you out with your quirk more, though." "It's all right," he says. "I learned plenty even without it." Kame grins and walks him to the car that's going to take him home. Like before, there are 3 sidekicks waiting to accompany him. "I'd go with you," she says as he gets into the car. But the big guy's being sniffy about his healers staying close to the agency with all that's gone on this week. Izuku nods understandingly and bids her goodbye. During the ride home, he texts Todoroki, who he hasn't had as much time to hang out with during the past couple of days thanks to his father. Thankfully, Todoroki says they've been doing less patrolling and more internal stuff, Endeavor showing him how to run a hero agency. He receives a message from Todoroki at 12:35 p.m. "He's basically been teaching me how to boss everyone around." Izuku snickers. He can practically hear the other boy's dry tone as he reads the message. Despite enjoying his internship week, for the most part, he is glad to be home. Inko seems pleased that he was escorted home by 3 sidekicks and is thrilled to see him, giving him a tight hug that makes his wounds ache. He hides his discomfort with a smile and forces himself not to limp as he walks inside the house, only to be nearly knocked over by Sushi as the cat bowls into him. "Aw, he really missed you," Inko coos. Izuku snorts and nuzzles his furry friend. "I missed you too, buddy." For some reason, when Izuku later tells Kacchan to come over so they can properly chat about their internship experiences, the blonde refuses. No matter how much Izuku presses, Kacchan won't budge, and he won't give him a good reason either. It's suspicious, so Izuku takes matters into his own hands and walks over to the other boy's house. Auntie Mitsuki lets him in with a grin. And when he sees Kacchan, he stops dead in his tracks. "Not a word," Kacchan growls. Izuku tries. He really does, but seeing his childhood friend's perfectly combed hair is too much for him to handle. He bursts out laughing. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 20 of The Roundabout Way of Fate. The second half to this chapter will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. I love the ending scene there where Izuku gets to see what Kacchan looked like during his internship. As the author had kind of alluded to that in the previous chapter when Kacchan was texting Izuku about his internship. Also, I'm really liking the interactions between Todoroki and Izuku, but then there's those underlying layers of, some of that angst about Izuku not feeling as though he's a hero, some of the comments from Todoroki and also Ida, especially in the hospital, following this incident. So interesting layers to this. I really like how the author's been putting it together. The second half of this chapter will pick up where things left off with Izuku getting back to school, so we'll see that coming up next. Please drop your comments below for me. Let me know what you're thinking. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.